minutes for the July 22, 2015 minute. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes?
Yes.
Yes. All right, do we have any questions about the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
I second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. The second item on our agenda is a public hearing on a request for a variance from the lot width to depth ratio in association with the subdivision plat of parcel 033.02, tax map 142, 12401 Union Road, 1.44 acre tract, zone rural residential or R1, 1.44 acres. Benchmark Associates, Inc. is the applicant. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and if I can go ahead and swear you in, sir. Do you promise to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, and could you please state your name?
And address? I'm Benny Moorman, president of Benchmark Associates, 10308 Hardin Valley Road.
All right, Mr. Morban, what we typically do is we have staff recommendation first, and then certainly we'll afford you the opportunity to speak. Mr. Shipley, do we have a recommendation for the staff?
Let me just review this real quick with you. It's we don't think we've probably had one of these type of requests in a long time, but in the town zoning ordinance, in this particular property is zoned rural residential R1. There's a requirement in there that any lot that's less than 150 feet in width, this is for a new lot that's being created, that the depth can't be greater than 3 times the width of the lot that's being created. And the purpose of that, I don't know if you're all familiar with, like sometimes you go in rural areas and you may have, a real large piece of property that people don't want to actually build a public street into the property, and what they end up doing is creating a bunch of what we call flag lots. But people have maybe 25 feet of frontage on a public street and these long driveways back to a huge portion of land. And what ends up happening is you got a lot of accesses closely spaced on a roadway, that people are really getting out of building a public street that would provide access interior to that larger tract of land. So what we're trying to do with that width to depth ratio requirement is to prevent the creation of flag lots. The applicant is, currently owns a piece of property at the corner of Smith Road and Union Road, and they're looking to subdivide it into 2 lots. The second lot is there on the lower portion of the screen, and as it's configured there on your screen, that's what the applicant is proposing. That reflects a width to depth ratio of about 3.46, and again the maximum permitted is 3:1, so they're requesting a variance from this requirement of 0.46. The property could actually be subdivided legally and meet the width to depth ratio, and that property configuration may look something like what's on the screen if that were done, and that creates an obvious unusual little portion of land that would go in behind what would be lot 2 that could certainly create some confusion about the property lines in the future, and maybe kind of an area of little to no maintenance. Might end up being kind of a no man's land back there, that strip. And certainly the staff would not feel that layout is ideal at all. Nor do we really believe that the creation of this particular lot compromises the width to depth ratio, that the intent of having the width to depth ratio in our zoning ordinance. This lot would have 77 feet of frontage. It would not be considered a flag lot. It's not providing access to a large piece of property, and they're not trying to get out of building a public street or anything like that. It's pretty limited on what it's doing. The staff couldn't really support this request, however, because the need for the variance in the first place is being created by the applicant's preference to subdivide the property. It's one of those variances that I'm not adamantly against it, because it makes a lot of sense to do something like that as opposed to the other layout. But again, the whole reason that they're needing a variance is created by the preference of the person wanting to subdivide the property to sell off a portion of it. The reason that the property line can't go any closer to the existing house there is that in the R1 zoning district, there's a 15-foot side yard setback. So that new property line on Lot 2 has to maintain at least 15 feet from that existing house that is on Lot 1. So otherwise, he could, move it over potentially a little bit to address the width to depth, but then he would create another violation that he'd have to request relief on as far as the setbacks. And certainly if you're going to request a variance, I think the width to depth in this case would be a much better variance than a side yard setback, because that lot's going to be pretty limited on what kind of house you could put there in the first place, because it's 77 feet wide and the side yard setbacks are 40 feet total. So you're looking at a 37-foot wide house, pretty narrow.
House and that is the proposed
That's
setup, right?
Yes.
What is it, if that was, okay, what's the distance there? I can't read it.
It's a
16
little,
feet?
it's right at 15 feet, just a little bit over 15. Benny knew what the setback had to be. So he's got a dimension call out there. It's hard to see it obviously on this screen. I've got a hard copy of the plat if y'all want to look at it. And pass it around. But you can see and this is what they're proposing, of course, with the variance.
This is the proposal.
Yeah, and that's 15 and a half feet is that dimension.
Are we ready to ask questions to you?
Yeah, and then Benny, of course, is here if you have any questions for him.
Okay, why is the no man's land here on this proposed where the yellow's at? Why does that not go all the way to the back part of the lot? Why do we have a no man's land here?
Because of what he's trying to do is lessen the depth so that it would meet that width to depth ratio.
That line
Lessening the-
severing the rear of Lot 2.
Lessening the depth,
Uh-huh.
so it will have the.
Problem is that lot is too long for its width, the new lot that they're wanting to create. So
So
what he's,
wait a minute, if you're 3-to-1 or more, right? Does it have to be exactly 3-to-1, or it can be 3
it
plus
just
1?
can't be any more than 3-to-1. It's 3.4.
3 to 1 or less, not more.
3-to-1 or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's the requirement, yeah.
This one here, that he's proposing
3.46.
here, is how much?
3.46 on that plat that's in front of you.
Okay, so we're 0.46 upside down, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that why the staff is against this?
Well, I'm relying on the parameters that I feel I can grant a variance on under state law. And if it's something the property has use right now, it's the guy's action of subdividing the property that's creating
I
the
can
whole
see that,
reason
yeah.
why he needs a variance. So I don't feel that that's grounds for granting a variance, though I certainly understand the logic and common sense of if you're going to be able to subdivide it anyway, like it's shown on the screen, and meet the requirement, you've got a real,
That's a mess.
you got a common sense dilemma there
And then
with
the
this.
77 feet for the proposed one there, if you put a 40-foot house on there, you got 35 feet to fool with.
It'd be a
Divided by
narrow
2,
house.
That's about 15 per distance, right?
You got about 37-foot house that you can
Divided
put
by
on.
2, so that's your 15 feet or more.
Well, it'd be your 77 minus
40.
40.
37.
His plan is
40-foot
to
house.
build
I
a
don't know what
home.
what they're planning on there, but I mean,
His
You'd have
plan
about-
the
is,
house is about as, that's not very big.
It'd be about a 37-foot wide is the most you could have because it's a 40-foot total side setback.
his plan is to build a home comparable to the homes back here, a narrow home with depth. He's not looking to build a small home. He's just gonna build a more like the old traditional neighborhood style home, where they were narrow on street frontage but deep.
What's on the other side of it that we're not seeing?
The other side of
See,
Union
way
Road
back
or,
at Kelly's place there.
yeah, Dr. Kelly is to the south. As far as east on Union, that's just another single-family lot.
Okay, Dr. Kelly, is there a house on this particular piece of property?
On Dr. Kelly's, yeah.
Where is it located at?
It's not too close to the property
No.
line.
He's
got a pretty,
he's even got a side entry garage on that
yeah,
side.
he's got a pretty good sized property.
How many acres, do you know?
It might say on that plat.
No, not Dr. Kelly's does it.
Doesn't say on here about Kelly's.
Not particularly close.
As a matter of fact, in our efforts of surveying, we discovered a boundary overlap between Dr. Kelly's property and this property, in which we represented to Dr. Kelly and his surveyor of record. That property was platted probably inside the last 10 years.
Yeah, it was.
And we represented where the surveyor had made an error. And due to senior rights, they had erred in Dr. Kelly's favor. And I was under the assumption, the surveyor had told me that they were going to replat the property at their expense for Dr. Kelly, but that has not happened.
Is that the, would that be the southwest?
It'd be Dr. Kelly's northwest
Put the other
line
one
and
back
our
on there.
southeast line.
Put the first one back on there, Mark. And show it right here, up on the top, the bottom right is what we're looking. We've got some dotted lines there.
Is that where you're talking about?
There's the dotted lines that you're seeing is a fence line.
Okay. Where is the discrepancy at on the?
The discrepancy is the property line between our newly created Lot 2 and Dr. Kelly's line. It's not a big discrepancy, but it's definitely a discrepancy. We found historical pins to support. If you notice on our survey, on the north side of Smith Road, we show the right-of-way over there. We surveyed that right-of-way to make sure that we were accurate in our efforts.
How many feet is that off?
I think it's less than a foot.
Oh, that's all we're talking about?
So you're 78 and a half or?
Whatever I'm showing on the drawing is exactly what we have proven, feel confident that our client owns.
Okay, okay.
And Dr. Kelly's surveyor agreed with our findings.
Okay.
Are the Kellys aware of this change?
Yes, sir. Well, it's not a change on our client's property, it would be a change on his, but
No,
yes,
I'm talking about the change on your client's property.
he's been advised that what my client's intent was, yes, sir. I mean, by state law, as a surveyor, if I find a gap or overlap, this is not something that all surveyors adhere to, but if I, in my survey efforts, find a gap or overlap between two adjoiners, I am not just to advise my client, I am to advise the adjoiner, and I have done that. And so in those discussions, I advised Dr. Kelly that I've been hired to subdivide this property in this manner.
What's behind there?
I don't remember what's back there.
That might be, that's the church property
Yeah.
to the west.
I originally did this survey about 2 years ago. The property owner, for
Presbyterian
whatever
Church.
reason, did not move forward at that time, but he's ready to now to build a home.
So the owner of this piece of property is going to build another house, or is this something that he's selling it so somebody else can build a house?
No, he's going to build him a house there. I think he's going to rent the other home or
Okay. on the larger piece of property?
Yes, sir.
So he's downsizing? Is that what I hear?
Actually, no, the new home will be bigger than that one. The new home will be better suited. I think he's had children and plans to have more children. Even though it'll be a narrow width home, it'll have more square footage than that home. And this is the only way that we can subdivide the property and be in compliance with the codes with the exception of lot to depth ratio. If you all do not favorably rule for this variance, his full intent is to, because it's 100% within the subdivision regs, is to come back with that Exhibit C. He would have me reconfigure the property to do that, and it will create that remnant parcel to the rear of the property that my biggest fear is that the owner of Lot 1 may not adequately maintain that. And if that happens, then Dr. Kelly's adversely impacted, the church is adversely impacted, and this Lot 2 would be adversely impacted.
I thought it was the same fellow.
But he may sell. The properties always change hands.
Okay.
My fear is that long-term, if we divide it that way, we're creating a remnant parcel, even though it's not truly a remnant parcel, it's part of that other tract that could become an eyesore.
Why don't you just build on his existing house? He needs more room.
Mark, could that be an L-shaped lot and get the width on the back side of it there?
Well, the width, no, he's got to deal with the depth is his problem.
But it's not up for us to redesign this.
Yeah, the width is measured from,
I'm just
The-
asking. Yeah, I know.
the width would be measured from its intersection of the right-of-way, which is 77 feet, so that's not going to help him. He's flaring it out in the back, so because he has to get through that 15-foot setback section where it abuts the house,
And that gets us up to the area requirements.
yeah, he has to have at least 20,000 square feet. I assume it's on the sanitary sewer. But the problem is he can't take that all the way to the current property line to the rear to the west because that's the depth issue that he's trying to avoid.
Very top corner, I see a telephone pedestal. Is there any sort of easement or right-of-way down that back property line between them and the church?
Yeah, I mean, there would be, as part of this plat, a 10-foot easement.
Created, yes, sir.
Sure would be, yeah.
Okay, so that whole thing is owned by the church. Okay.
I think their whole property abuts and it goes even further to the south. I mean, they may be able to do something in a covenant that addresses that area more specifically. I don't know. I'm not.
Well, I don't know what all the houses are along there. I haven't been on Union Road in a long while, but to have a big lot like that thing must be about, what, almost 2 acres? And what you do, and you've got a house sitting in the middle of it and want to divide it up, and there are other houses that are running down through there. So one of those people hadn't gotten up in arms.
If they're aware of it. What's precedence what previously went on in this case? Similar situation.
On a width to depth,
Yes.
like I said earlier, we don't hardly ever have anybody violate it. I think it's maybe come up once or twice. I don't believe it was approved either time, as far as I remember. I can't really tell you with 100% accuracy on that, but it's been years based on my memory. It's been a long time since we've considered a width to depth variance.
What does the state law say?
Well, I mean, actions, if it's preference, which essentially this really boils down to preference, in my opinion, that really is not going to be sufficient grounds for granting a variance.
Okay.
I don't think that, in all honesty, subdividing it like this creates harm to the intent of the width to depth ratio. And you do have to give some thought to that, because you got to always look back when you're dealing with these regulations. What was the intent of having this regulation in the first place? And if you have an action before you that you feel clearly doesn't harm that intent, then certainly that may be an argument for granting relief for that case. It'd be hard to say you'd be setting a precedent with this, because
Beg pardon?
it would be hard for me to say that you'd be setting a precedent with this.
If I may interject, I think Mark hit on a very important fact at the very beginning, and that is that this ordinance was set up to prevent abuse of existing right-of-ways and allowing someone to create a multitude of lots with many drive accesses on it. That's what needs to, I think, be in the back of our mind and what we're concentrating on. In this instance, this would only allow for one forever and ever and ever, one drive. And in that light, I don't think it's setting a precedent.
You make let's say, a convincing argument, but we're still looking at what the staff has to recommend and what they have to go through with the ordinances and what they have on the books. So we're in kind of a dilemma here, especially with this second one with the yellow line and red lines on it, and having that thing gerrymandered like that is just, to me, ridiculous.
And I agree it's ridiculous, but the whole point of that was to represent to this board that we're only asking for this variance to keep from doing that. I mean, the guy bought the property about 3 years ago with the intent of subdividing, and that other configuration is 100% in compliance with the zoning. It's 100% in compliance with the zoning and subdivision regs.
You mean the one with all the gerrymandering there?
Yes, sir. We wouldn't be before this body at all. And it took some doing by me to get him to allow me to come to this body and ask for this variance. He was ready to do the other configuration because it was the path of least resistance. And he has told me that if we're not successful, he wants me to resubmit the plat as shown on Exhibit C.
What we do is, what we're up against here is this three to one. And your recommendations and the staff's recommendations on that, Mark. And are we fixed in concrete on what you're saying on this?
Well, like I said earlier, if you wanted to look at considering relief in this case, I think you do have to go back to the intent of the regulation. Well, that's a good question, because obviously this has been in place for, a long time.
Can I understand that?
That is the intent under just common subdivision regulation practice, is that you're trying to, because I dealt with this when I was a planner for the county, and
Flag lots.
yeah, well, you had those all the time. I mean, it was just, like they'd be 5 or 6 of them are side by side, and they'd be feeding into like 200 acres back there.
But I mean, at the heart of it, we have a rule, and the rule is that you have a lot that's completely in compliance right now,
That's right.
but for the preference of the owner to want to subdivide it and make 2 lots for whatever purpose, sell one, build something else on it, whatever.
Right.
But for their complete preference, they would be in complete compliance. Now, they're free to make it this gerrymandering other thing, but I mean, it's kind of like the issue
True.
that we had with regard to nice trees the last time we
Right. It is.
My preference was to have nice trees, but at the same time, there was just my preference. There was
Yeah.
absolutely no legitimate reason based on the lot as it existed, why I
Yeah.
needed to do that, so we didn't do it.
Well, that's my recommendation. I mean, you pretty much crystallized what I would recommend. I think it is driven by preference. I don't like this Exhibit C layout, but I just don't know, other than the intent, you know, how I could support it with the parameters that we have to go by for granting variances.
I agree with Mr. LaMarche in the complete sentiment that we're not here to come up with an alternate plan that's equally pleasing. And, you know, whether that's buying more land from Dr. Kelly, or whether that's, you know, moving the existing house somewhere else, or bulldozing part of the existing house, or whatever. I mean, if the existing house weren't there, you'd subdivide it any way you want to and put two houses on it. So, you know, but for the preference of the existing owner to make more of the property than what it was intended to be, that's already in compliance with our regulations, I mean, I don't see how I can do this just because it looks so dumb doing it the other way.
Yeah.
The second way, the gerrymandering way.
I understand, yeah.
Is this a subdivision?
It is a subdivision under
What
state law.
subdivision?
Huh? Oh, I mean, it's a subdivision of property. It's not part of a subdivision development, no.
Nice area, that Union Road area is good.
Yes, it is. And they'll have to get their access, you know, approved through the Planning Commission and Board of Mayor and Alderman when they try to for a building permit, because that is a local collector street.
Do you envision that as a problem? I guess a question I would pose, Mark, is do you envision, and are you in agreement with me that Exhibit C layout is 100% within the regs and would get approved?
Yeah, I think the depth doesn't exceed the, it doesn't violate the 3-to-1.
Well, I can assure you that part. I
Yeah.
did the calculations there, but I just,
So,
I guess what I want this
The only
board,
thing wrong with that is,
I
if you
mean,
get
it's-
Exhibit C approved, you've got the same size lot
yes,
to
sir.
put a house on.
Yes,
You got
sir.
77 feet of width, and a house that's gonna have to be something like 40 feet. So no matter what part, whether you get B or C, to me, you're gonna have something odd on there. It's not facing like it should toward Union Road. Unless he's gonna make a house like we got down in Charleston,
That's what I'm talking about, a traditional style home.
he's talking about something
traditional
back here.
Charleston, but not here.
No, not to Farragut maybe, but you've got them right here behind.
Yeah, I know.
And then you've got, of course, downtown Knoxville, you've got tons of those style homes.
Well, he will have to request a variance for his access through the access ordinance. I mean, that's not before this body. They don't grant variances on that, but he will through the Planning Commission. No, because it's within 200 feet of that other access, I believe, where he would put a new access.
So Exhibit C, as he said, would probably get approved? Is that what you're saying?
As far as the subdivision itself, yeah, I mean, it, not, if you're gonna do that, I need,
Setting any precedent or anything like that? It seems to me that it'd be absolutely dumb to try to do something like Exhibit C just to get .44 out of 3-to-1.
well, you're gonna have to justify your motion, I think, in a way that would, you know, I mean, just because it doesn't look good, and we'll have to figure out.
By the way the land is laid out, that the Exhibit B gives you more symmetry and living capabilities in that area than Exhibit C, and leaves us with no man's land back there, gone.
As far as maintenance?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? My only discussion would be I'm concerned that keeping in full agreement with Mr. LaMarche on the fact that Exhibit C is stupid and no one really wants it to wind up looking that way and create that no man's land. But to me, it's no different than the last issue we had with the old growth trees. And I want the old growth trees to be there, but other than my preference and the preference of how I feel that I would like it to look, there's no legitimate reason in law why I should grant this variance. And so I have a very serious concern that by doing so, I don't know what they intended when they made this. I mean, I understand that flagship lots are a problem and that this is not a flagship lot. And so I appreciate the fact that maybe there's some reason, but, you know, for the ordinance being created in the first place with that regard. But as the ordinance exists today, I mean, maybe the ordinance is there so they don't subdivide existing large lots that have a home in the center of it to make very small lots and make idiotic-looking homes on pieces of property out of it. I don't know why it's there.
Well, the one thing about what you just said, I agree with you last time when we had this issue on the trees, but like you're saying, have a big lot and divide it up, and then they still have to have the 3-to-1 ratio. Sure. And if you try to take a 2-acre lot and try to divide it up into 5 acres, 5 different lots rather, excuse me, you can't do it. That's a no-no. But this is so close, and just for the sake of the symmetry and everything else here, I just don't see any reason not to grant this. And I may be 100% out of phase here, but I don't think we're setting a precedent. And that was the only thing I was concerned about. If we're setting a precedent, I don't want to do it. But if we're not, and the intent is such that it's vague, then to me, we ought to go ahead and grant this.
Do you have any more discussion?
Jesse? Ron?
What was the other thing you were talking about the driveway variance?
Well, they'll have to go before, when they get ready to submit for a building permit, they would have to request a variance from the driveway space distance from the driveways on a collector street. They have to be 200 feet apart, and there's no way they'll be able to meet that.
Something different that's come in here.
That's not part of your all's review, but that
We wouldn't have anything to do with that.
it's something that I'll point out to the planning commission as far as creating the lot itself, you know, is something they need to think about, but, you know, it's not part of your all's review as far as,
But is it something that's going to come before us in the future?
no.
If they turned it down and
That's a variance for that ordinance goes to the planning commission and the board of mayor and aldermen.
if they turn it down and there's no appeal?
Well, I suppose there's always an appeal, but it doesn't go to you all. It would go to Chancery Court.
Oh,
If
okay.
they appealed the board of mayor and aldermen's decision.
Mark, I guess I would ask one more time, do you have the rule on just the black and white of when we're authorized to grant a variance? I mean, it's a very short, we may grant a variance if, and it talks about whether or not there's an irregularity in the lot size, whether there's,
Yeah.
that would be helpful for me to see.
The thing that they've got on here that he put on about just at the owner's request, that is not a reason for granting a variance. Because that's not a hardship or anything like that. It doesn't cost him money or anything like that. He's doing this, he's making money evidently.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. He's making one.
We're just doing this because, to me, it'd be nonsensical to go any other way based on the neighborhood and everything else there.
I think,
If I can pull that up.
if I could interject, I think I agree with him totally. My fear, and the reason I asked the client to come before this body for this variance, is Exhibit C, which is an approvable subdivision, meets the regs, could create hardship to the surrounding property owners because the property wouldn't be maintained. And by acquiring this variance and subdividing it the way we want to on Exhibit B, the public's best interest is being served.
Okay.
Say that if you came before us for Exhibit C and that property back there was like that, before you could get approval, we would have that there would be somebody maintaining that lot, or we would not grant it.
Well, let me read this because this is what Keith is getting at. The purpose of the variance is to modify the strict application of the specific requirements of this ordinance in the case of exceptionally irregular, narrow, shallow, or steep lots or other exceptional physical conditions whereby such strict application would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship which would deprive an owner of the reasonable use of the land. From a staff's perspective, this request does not satisfy that wording. This irregular shaped lot is being created. It's not a lot of record. It's a tough one. I mean, it is. It's, you know. But that's what it says, and that's taken straight out from the Tennessee Code.
All right, gentlemen, if there's no further discussion, I think that we are ready for a vote.
One more item. Mark, what's the ordinance on upkeep of the property?
Well, you just have to you can't have it more than a foot overgrown within 100 feet of a residence. That's our overgrown lot ordinance in the property maintenance code is to not exceed predominantly over a foot if it's within 100 feet. I think it's 100 feet of a residence.
So, in that case, if he went with this irregular, which would be Exhibit C, am I right?
Yes.
He would be within 100 feet of the residence.
Yeah, probably would be.
But would it be this residence or the other person's, current property?
Any residents?
Which one is it?
Any
residence?
existing residence, yes.
So the existing property owner would have to keep this irregular shape up according to the town ordinance?
Yeah. I mean, unless it's just a woodland area or something, I don't.
What do we got there, sir?
Currently, it's woodland, but my fear is if in the event that the new lot's created and that guy builds the home that I've heard that he plans to build, which is as you phrased it, a Charleston-style home, chances are he will clear all but that remnant parcel. And once you allow light in there, then you allow the opportunity for undergrowth and stuff. And with it being woods, I think you could get into where you've got briars and whatnot. And that's what I was trying to avoid.
Briar, I mean, it's still 12 inches though, right? That somebody has to keep it below that?
I detect some iffies here, except for two of us.
I'm candidly iffy.
And two.
There's 2 and 2.
And we can take a vote. I mean, that's what we're here to do. Yep. All right, let's go ahead. If discussion has concluded, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All against, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Okay. The variance fails then. Yes,
Thank you, gentlemen.
passed by the affirmative.
Appreciate your time.
All right, there being no further business, do I have a motion to conclude our meeting this evening?
Afraid to make another motion.
No training?
I will approve your next motion.
I'll give you a copy. call
Adjourn.
about this other.
All right, we are adjourned, gentlemen.
Hey, just remind you guys, Thursday, we've got that training session, if you can make it,
About
6 to
6:15.
8.
I'll be here.
Yeah, if you can come in, a
6
little-
to
yeah,
8
6
p.m.
to 8.
Right here?
Yes,
Yeah.
It's going to be a big crowd, won't it?
probably will be. It was last year. It's pretty good. I
Okay.
probably won't be here, but Ashley will be here.
Is that training?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Most of us are sick, except for maybe Corky's already
I
trained out.
think